Thank you all for joining us in person, and for those who are joining us online, thank you. This panel discussion is called Going Far Together. My name is Ashleigh Gordon. I'm the co-founder, artistic director, and violist of Castle of Our Skins, and I have three panelists with me on stage today. So Dr. Leah Uribe. Yes, woo, woo, woo. Associate Dean, Professor of Music at University of Arkansas, Dr. Marcus Norris, composer, director of Southside Symphony, and Matthew J. Detrick, founder, CEO, violinist of Apollo Chamber Players. You all will get a chance to introduce yourselves. You'll get a chance to know them and their work in more detail once we dive into the discussion. Our format today, like other sessions, includes a Q&A portion that you're welcome to participate in live, and we'll have a microphone if you want to be pseudo-live for those here, and then for those that are tuning in online, you can also drop a question in the app. So in thinking about the title of this session, Going Far Together, paired against the backdrop of current state of affairs, I as moderator, couldn't help think of a number of different questions that challenge that statement. So where are we going being one? Are we actually going far, or are we drawing closer to the root ills that ultimately created this country? And how can we do anything together when we feel so irreconcilably far apart? But in thinking about the subtitle of this session, Chamber Music and its intersection with activism, social justice, and wellness, I was reminded that we can indeed, perhaps in a microcosmic way, have a level of togetherness, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and a version of democracy that does indeed inspire collective action and connection. So often when we speak about chamber music, we equate it with being its own democratic process, where individual voices are not only welcomed, but are needed. They are essential to lift the music from off the page, where engaged dialogue is foundational, deep listening is valued, and active participation is commonplace. Chamber music is fueled by collective input. It's foundational, again, to how we as artists feed off of one another, how we connect with communities we serve, and perhaps most importantly, how we experience the world we live in. So I'm curious, my first question for all of you is, how does the concept of collective action or collective input resonate with you and your work? Would anyone like to take that one first, or I can pick and choose?
I'll start us off. So my name is Marcus. My group is called Southside Symphony, and I started it with this idea, like, what if the orchestra didn't exist and it was invented today by a young black man? It's like, what would that look like? Where would they play? What would they play? And so that kind of gave me the freedom to design my own models and organizational aspects. And so when I think about, like, together, and I feel like now more than ever with everything happening right now, it's like you really have to lean into your community, into your tribe. Like, I think about this chamber series we're doing right now called Southside Sessions. I'm based in LA, in Inglewood, and really the main reason we're doing it is, like, yeah, we want to play music and make opportunity for young artists to play music that they want to play, but it's really to foster a community and to just make this safe space where we can all, like, you know, I say to, like, love on each other, you know, like, so often in our careers, especially in LA, it's like everything is hustle, everything is transactional, everything is, you know, you're grinding, you're comparing resumes, you're talking about, I'm the guy that did blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I just wanted to make a space that was, like, anti all of that, like, where you could just come together and play some cool music with people that you admire and respect.
This is first, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here in front of you and to share my experiences. And Leah Uribe from the University of Arkansas. I have so many identities and roles represented here in my person and my practice. So I'm very proud to do that. And I'm holding a space for all of us that need that extra support and extra love these days, and action as well. I'm a bassoonist, and part of my practice, yay bassoon, has been chamber music. But with years, and even before all of these conversations were so dominant in our spheres, we were there disrupting what our environment with the power of chamber music, which I consider a microcosmos of life and also a place for community organizing. I think the fact that it's less voices, we get to choose who to play with most of the time, we get to choose our repertoire and our spaces. That's a place in which should be, and I encourage all of you doing that, to find the space to have the conversation. I think that music by itself has a lot of power, a haven for tranquility, a place to depart from spaces that are busy by nature, but also spaces in which we can exchange who we are and all the ideas that we bring with us. So I think that collective force is very present in those environments, and from many perspectives that I think we're going to touch on later, and how we curate, how do we lead those conversations and our actions. But that's how I see collective power.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is my first Sphinx conference, and I'm very inspired. Let's give it up for Sphinx. Yeah. I'm also representing the great city of Houston, Texas. But let me start a little bit about myself. There's only really two things you need to know about me to know why I take, who I am and why I do what I do. The first is that I love space. I love anything space related. I have my entire life. I love Star Trek. I even have some Star Trek live long and prosper stocks here. Okay, so live long and prosper, everyone. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and in fact, one of my aspirations, moonshot aspirations, was to become the first person to play the violin in space. I even wrote that in an essay, and I had a teacher that told me, "Shoot for the stars, Matt. You can do anything you want to do in life." The second thing about me is that I'm a PK. Any other PKs out there? All right, give it up for PK. So for those of you who don't know the vernacular, that means a pastor's kid. I come from, my dad's a pastor, retired minister. My grandfather on both sides, my grandfathers are all ministers. My uncles are ministers, my aunts, basically everyone in my family is a minister. I am not a minister, but I feel like what I do now with Apollo is ministering in a way through music and the arts. So I obviously also didn't become an astronaut, although I still think I could maybe get to space someday. But I did serendipitously find myself in Space City, Houston, Texas. I grew up after high school in Pennsylvania. I went to Rice University for my undergrad and master's, and founded Apollo a couple years after that. I was a little disillusioned with the orchestra audition circuit, and I wanted to play chamber music because it was very connective, and I wanted to just have some fun with some friends. So using Houston as kind of the model of diversity, and that is the inspiration and impetus. I started and crafted programs with a multicultural element around it. A few years later, we kind of solidified our mission statement, which is to connect communities and cultures through globally inspired music.
Thank you. And I would love to now ask each of you a little bit more about space, and not thinking so extraterrestrial.
What kind of space?
But thinking about the space that you occupy. So we have a variety of ways that we can interpret those spaces that we occupy, whether it's in academia, whether it's in a musical space, whether it's in an educational space, et cetera. But how we form our spaces, and how we really, through curation, how we curate those spaces. So I would like to think that we are all in some way, shape, or form musical storytellers, and we are able to do that through artistic direction in a lot of ways. So as musical storytellers, we have the unique ability to really tell global aspects, global stories, multicultural, multifaceted, stories of what humanity could look like, what it is today, what it has the potential to be. So in thinking about the narratives that we can shape and how we can do that through curation, I wonder if you can talk about how you, if we were to look inside your mind, how you go about curating. So whether that is, again, a space, a physical space, an experience, a collaboration, what's your process, your inspiration, and if that relates, again, to that idea of collective action. So if you would like to start.
Absolutely. It's been a really interesting question in my mind for the longest time, like how to make the right decisions and how to suggest paths to make the right decisions, whatever that right decision means for you. And I encountered this theoretical frame that I just needed because I work in a state institution that I know these days it's very difficult to have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion just for the sake of it. So how do I deliver this message to my students as a former chair of my department, to my faculty members now as associate dean? How do I look with equity and with opportunities through what we can offer to our students? And arrived to me a book that I hold close to my heart is Creative Justice by Mike Bank. And he provides 3 things that have become very important in my mind when I'm making decisions about the music we play, the music I suggest, or in many other environments not connected to music. One of them is doing justice to the cultural product. And it is that, I think, responsibility that we have to bring new pieces or pieces that represent who we are to the stages or to the places where we are connecting with some sort of background in which we allow our audiences, we allow cultural producers, we encourage and empower people to connect with the pieces and to understand the value that they have that is given by the artists that are performing, by the composers that are writing those pieces, not by the external forces that have come to us traditionally to determine what is good, what is not good. So that is a very important aspect of my thinking. The other one is parity of opportunities and thinking about who is there and who is not there, who has had the opportunity to be in those stages, in those audiences, who has had the opportunity to be a philanthropist. And this ecosystem, because it is an ecosystem when we make music, in my world anyway, the multiple parts, how are we empowering all of them to have parity of opportunities and uplifting the identities, obviously, that are not always there. And the third one is reduction of harm. And this is a question that I encourage my people around all the time, my fellow musicians, my faculty, my peers, my students as well. How are we going to use this opportunity to reduce the harm and to ameliorate, if possible, the harm that has been caused in our communities and our identities, in the music that has been presented, to disrupt and redirect the path of what we do as music makers or otherwise.
Can I stay on you for a second, and can you give us maybe an example of how you realized that those 3, either all 3 or 1 or 2 of those 3?
Those are not mine.
But in terms of an ideology, how is that realized? How does that translate into, I have this on the simmer burner, and now I have this physical space that I'm going to transform?
It's not the only source, right? It's just something that I needed as a frame to justify, if you will, my doings, right? But choosing what is the piece that I'm going to propose for the upcoming, convention for double readers, right? Let's go Latin music, right? So yeah, Latin music is so fun, and we dance to it, and light, programming. How can we put that in the forefront and help understand my colleagues that the seriousness, the professionalism, the intensity, the representational power of these pieces has to be also at the forefront, and we can still dance and celebrate, and we can still have joy, because, by the way, joy is a tool of resistance, joy and optimism and hope. So that's important to remember these days, right? Yes. So the choosing of that piece, and then in the moment of presenting this piece, I intentionally encourage my group, myself, my students to take the time to talk about that piece and to situate that piece in a context that validates or explains or provides the context necessary for people to be able to understand the value of the piece. It's not in comparison to the sonata that another composer, white European, that wrote for bassoon and piano, but has some other very important aspects pedagogically, culturally, music itself. We don't have to even talk about these other things, right? So contextualizing, that's a way to that realization. The parity of opportunities, who am I choosing to play with me, right? Who's my partner in this performance? Who is there with me? That's one thing. And reduction of harm, this is for other spaces as well, but am I really, and this was mentioned in other spaces today, am I working with the community or for the community, right? That I am presenting my performance with, as Leanne's presentation earlier today, talking about cities and community and connection. So am I just going to the Latinx community in my area to play this piece because I think it's so cool for them, to see me there as an accomplished bassoonist? Or in what way are we interacting and reducing the harm? How much is this even interaction between these two, members of community as a performer, as an audience, and how it's equal and balanced and transformative for all of us?
Thank you for elaborating. I think that's really helpful and hopefully provides clarity too for our audience. Around connection, I think, Marcus, you can really speak to some of the conversations that we've had around how you, in thinking about curating and thinking about as a Black man creating this orchestra, how you really think about space. So can you share a little bit more for you?
So I always, like, my guiding light is authenticity. And I am really big on, like, you can't separate the people from the music. And I feel like, especially in America, like, so often it's like they love Black art, they love Black music, they love Black language and the way we talk and the way we dress and the way we sing and dance, but they don't often love Black people. And so I kind of use authenticity as my guiding light. Like, I'm a composer and I work in concerts, I work in TV and film. And I've had to have conversations in some of those worlds because they're like, oh yeah, we want this like jazzy sound and we want this and this and this. But yeah, so we want you to use this orchestra that we always use when we use stuff. And I'm like, no, like if you want that sound, it's like you gotta hire my guy. It's like, you gotta let me, like I had to put like my neck on the line or my job on the line. I'm like, I'm not doing it unless my people can do it. And I think that's collective activism, And I was talking to Loki Karuna. I imagine a lot of people here know, just an amazing human, as well as his resume. And we were talking about like authenticity and all these things. And at one point, like I kind of said as a joke, but like a half joke, I'm like, I'm hiring predominantly Black musicians to play Black music for predominantly Black audiences. And afterwards, I'm like, it was only half a joke. I'm like, that's kind of really, like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to take that with us. And so, like, when I'm thinking about curating spaces, I'm thinking about curating spaces that, like, I love what you said about, like, in conversation with these communities and not just, like, playing music at you and then be like, well, why aren't they reacting to it? It's like, because you haven't had any conversations with them, And so I'm thinking about trying to make spaces that, like, aren't defined by their relationship to whiteness or to these systems, and just making spaces where we can love on each other and people can celebrate the things that they do love rather than complain about the things that they don't. And that's part of it too, right? You need a place where you can voice these like frustrations that we all feel. But like my work as of late has been like, how do I make these spaces where everybody is welcome, like with warm and open arms, but like we are unapologetically celebrating these things because this is what we love,
Can you, for those that don't know Marcus and your, is it gold and black pinstripe suit, and how you present, how you bring your fullness, can you sort of describe what that experience looks like? So what a Southside Symphony, for instance, experience that you've curated looks like?
So lately I've been calling it a fusion orchestra. But the way we talk about these things always evolved because it's like we're steeped in like the tradition of like a Cab Calloway and his orchestra or Quincy Jones and his orchestra. We do orchestral concerts. We've been doing this like chamber series, which is like the joy of my life right now, monthly out in LA. We play on like film and TV stuff. We've done records. We did a couple records on Andra Day's last album. I did some strings for Beyonce when she did the Dubai thing. We're just doing a lot of different stuff because we just don't have to. We don't have like the burden to like follow these models, because when I was starting it, it was just like, I was telling Matt this yesterday. I was like, when I started Southside Symphony, there weren't like, I looked around and I was like, okay, I love orchestral music and I love the mastery, and I studied a lot of the classical masters and the jazz masters, and I love the technical aspect of it, but I'm like, how many of these orchestras, like if I'm being honest, are playing living people at that time? But I was like, let alone people that look like me, you know, and then let alone people like the types of music that I've been influenced by. So there weren't really opportunities for me to do that. So then I kind of told to myself how my brain works, where I'm like, well, like if these standards were designed to exclude me, then I don't have to feel any pressure to like hold up this, you know what I mean? Like that's not my burden. That's somebody's burden, but it's not mine, you know? All that goes to say is it's like, you just gotta hear it. You just gotta hear it. I don't know. It's not helpful, sorry.
We'll make sure people have your website and can check out and see for themselves. Can you share on behalf of Apollo and as artistic director, as a fellow co-founder, and I understand what that means and the ideology, and so much of you is poured into your curation. So from this season, from previous seasons, what is your thought process around curating your programs?
Sure, thanks, Ashleigh. I think one of the strengths of what we do, again, is kind of being inspired by the multicultural diversity of Houston, and just a couple of data points there. If you were at the last panel, you may have heard some of this, but the area of Houston is larger than the state of New Jersey. Houston will overtake Chicago as the third largest city in the United States in a few years. I can think that's demographically projected. And what's really special, I think, is that something called the entropy index. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but that basically means that that it's divided pretty much evenly balanced between the major ethnicities: white, black, Asian, and Latino. And so it's like part and parcel of what our city is about. In addition, I feel like the city is what Thomas Jefferson called a laboratory of democracy in the best sense of the word. And we may get into this a little bit later as well, but I really think that, you know, the way we can be activists and make a difference in what's going on today, especially if what's going on at the national and international level seems so intractable, our challenges, what we can do at the local level in our cities and reflecting that, I think that's where the power is. So with some of our programming, I'll give a couple of examples from this year. Our whole season was inspired by democracy and themes of democracy and different pillars. So the first concert was titled Liberty, and we had actor and activist George Takei join us. Again, this back to the Star Trek, love of Star Trek, and it was just a dream come true to work with such a purposeful human being. And he spoke about, the commission was called The Book of Names, and it was about the 125,181 Japanese Americans that were interned during World War II. I think thinking that in the context of where we are politically now with this new administration, it doesn't seem so far-fetched. But George, there was a moment in this piece. It's by Texas A&M composer Marty Regan, who's a dear friend of ours now. And there's a moment in there where we speak names of people that were interned, and the piece the climax was George speaking his own name and his family's names. So it was really powerful, and I feel like, again, it can kind of shine a light on what's going on today, the past, reflecting the present, reflected in the past, and now the future. Also in that concert, there was more diversity too. We had a string quartet by Humayun Saki, who's an Afghan-American composer and rhubarb performer, his very first string quartet. We also performed a piece by Adolphus Hailstork, actually it's called Deep River Rhapsody for String Quartet, that Ashleigh Gordon recorded and performed with us a couple of years ago now. You can check it out. It's on our album Trace of Time, just came out. And then we also had, we had John Holliday join for that. He's actually sang a verse of Deep River before he played it. So then this is like the 11th time we've performed this piece in different contexts. So I'm always happy to be able to do that. But the concert, that particular concert was the highlight of the season so far. We're going to be ending the season a program called Freedom, and we're working with the High School for the Performing Arts in Houston and asking creative writing and U.S. history students to write essays on what democracy means to them, so we can have a kind of foster an intergenerational conversation. And then that's going to be set to a libretto, to a new piece with the choir at the school as well, by Marcus Moroney, who's a fabulous composer at the University of Houston. So I think hopefully that will help facilitate, a conversation on many different levels about what does freedom, what does democracy mean right now. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's because of some of that work that you, with Apollo Chamber Players, are the Chamber of Music America Ensemble of the Year.
Thank you for that.
I want to stay on you a little bit, Matthew, and it's a great segue, I think, in thinking about curating physical spaces, curating experiences, and then also making sure that as musical storytellers, we recognize that we are in dialogue. So we can talk all we want, we can play all we want, but someone needs to listen. So how do we also curate experiences where listening for understanding, for empathy, for getting inside of someone's heads and hearts so that they can go and actually change their hands, which if we're trying to be change agents, we hope that we can inspire. So I wonder if you can share a little bit more about kind of beyond the music, if there's ways that you think intentionally in curating spaces where you can hold dialogue around activism, social commentary, justice, other conversations.
Thanks. I should mention too, commissioning new music and new art is kind of part and parcel of what we do. We have over 70 new music commissions now to our catalog, and 7 albums of a lot of that music. No albums of Beethoven. String quartets, they've been done ad nauseum, and I love Beethoven. But I'll say one of the things that I'm very proud of too is getting into the community. We just finished this project called Library Voyage. And I can kind of pick up the tangent about Houston and Harris County, which surrounds the city of Houston. We performed in all of the public library branches in Harris County, and it was a partnership with the library. And in that space, we have this wonderful catalog of multicultural music that we curated to each, neighborhood community around, Native American History Month and Black History Month and anything you could think of. But it was really special in doing some of these programs. And we drove over 2,000 miles or something, too. We didn't think about that at the beginning. And we really want this to be a model for other cities, too, because I think that third space is so important to creating that community and bringing the art outside of the concert hall. But I'll say, too, I mentioned our Liberty concert and working with big stars like George Takei, but some of the most heartfelt moments that I've had personally have been playing these library shows, and then a mother or a father comes up to me afterwards and said, we had no idea what this kind of experience would be. You created these core memories for our children today. We can never get to a concert downtown, and also doing some sensory-friendly performances too. Kind of delving into that space. The families that you reach that way, and the gratification that they have for what for creating music for their kids or for their family. I mean, it's priceless, and I think that can help us all go farther together in some sense.
Yeah. I'll open it up for other thoughts around how you're able to hold space for dialogue, how you think about that in the curatorial process.
So I always say that you can't have meaningful relationships without conflict resolution and having hard conversations. So I try to facilitate some of those with some of our programming. We did a big one in the summer that was really fun called Black Music and Anime. And it was I started with this idea of how come so many young Black folks love anime? Myself included, you know what I mean? Because we're not represented in it. And when we, the rare few times that we are, it's not always great. You know what I mean? But we love it and are passionate about it. There are people whose whole identity is built around this thing. And then on the flip side, if you watch anime, it's so many of the music, which anime, if you're not an anime fan, it's the music is a big part of why people love it. But so much of it is just unapologetically Black American music. It's like Cowboy Bebop is it's so good. Or some of it is hip hop and jazz and all of these things. And I was just curious why. And so I just went down this deep rabbit hole of this cultural exchange that's been happening for decades between Black American and East Asian cultures. We played some Wu-Tang on there. We looked at New Jabez. But to the dialogues though, I think it's really important that you aren't afraid to have the hard conversations, but you do it with I choose, I should say, to do it with we'll take everybody on this journey with us, and we'll be empathetic and all of these, but we're not going to filter it through the lens of white comfortability. You have to be able to have these hard conversations as long as they're based in truth, right? So, for example, my kind of so it was a concert, but it was a block party. We had like food trucks, and we did an anime screening, and I kind of like thought of it as like a party, concert, lecture, hang. And but I would like talk and give like context in between pieces, you know. And what my main theses was I was like, one, we are like celebrating, like unapologetically celebrating the contributions of our East Asian brothers and sisters to this thing that we call Black music, right? But two, my second point was like, we are not going to forget to get it from the source as well, you know. And we have to talk about like why so often does like America love Black music or Black art, but not necessarily the people. And you know, and I said I was like, you know, like, but I took people on a journey. It's not like you don't need me to get up there and like, hey guys, racism is bad. Did you know that? You know that what like I spent a lot of my 20s just like angry all the time, and you still are angry, and we should be, but like after a certain point, you get to like, what's next? So I was like, hey, if you love Japanese jazz like I do, you know what you might also like? Jazz. I'm like, if you love K-pop and like those boy bands that they have in K-pop, does anybody know that stuff? It's so good. It's just like, it's pure like early 2000s R&B in boy band form. It's so good. But I was like, if you like that, wait till you see what Bobby Brown did with New Edition. you know what I mean? So it's like, but in that context, said in that way, it's like I'm being very clear about my point, and I'm not afraid to have that like hard conversation about like, well, why do you think that is, you know? And I'm not like putting on myself to come to you with like, I have all the answers. I don't necessarily, you know what I mean? Who am I? What do I know? But it's like I am making spaces for those conversations to happen in a way that's not necessarily like attacking somebody, or like that like people aren't welcome. You know what I mean? And so I think about that. I think you can't have meaningful relationships without hard conversations. So I think we have to get good as we can, you know what I mean, at having those conversations.
And do you find receptivity, if I can stay on you for a second, do you find receptivity with your party, concert, lecture attendees to want to engage? And as a follow-up, do you, in other spaces when you're an attendee, do you see a different vibe? Do you see a different openness, I guess, for dialogue?
1,000%. Like when we did this concert, I was like floored. This was the longest after, like, because after you do, you know, a lot of you are musicians, I imagine. After you do like a cool concert or people hear you talk about stuff, they want to like talk to you afterwards. For this one, when I tell you I was out there until like, it was like a line. Like it was at least like an hour and a half of like people who just want to talk about these things. Because a lot, what you find once you start like talking about things that you care about is like, it makes it easier for like-minded people to find you. You know what I mean? Like-minded people, or people who are like, I ain't like how you said blah, but you know what I mean? But that's what we're here for. We're like you can't like, yeah, I want community only when they agree with me. And do I see a different vibe for sure at other places? For sure. And I'm not here to like dunk on nobody or nothing, but I just feel like the goals are different. That's why I told you, like, I loved what you said about like, it's not a one-way thing. And I think so many other places and organizations would do well to learn from what you said. It's like, you know, it's just what's their goal at the end of the day. And then like, how are they facilitating that, you know?
Perfect segue.
Perfect. I think it's just it's so beautiful and so difficult, right? To connect at that level of humanness and to find that belonging and to think about the dignity of being in the spaces where we deserve to be, right? And how we all move together. And that's the question that stays in my mind all the time. My career started as a bassoonist, as a musician, and teaching and doing the orchestral thing. And at some point I realized that I needed a bigger platform to talk about things that are important to me, to my communities. So the dialogue continued, but in a different space, as an educator, as an administrator, as chair of my department, as associate dean, as member of my community, my interaction with my city and my city leaders to make sure that they're thinking that the arts have a very important place in conversations, not as an afterthought, like, and let's add the music, but how artists have a place and a way to deliver messages in a very, very loud way without sometimes even have to say the words, right? It's who you choose to be on the stage and the power of that representation of the piece you're choosing, whatever that is, right? So the dialogue has continued in many places, but I also want to say that, to your point, we all have the responsibility to name the harm, at the same time bring spaces with optimism and hopes to move everybody together, right? And I also think that all of us interested in this cause are advocates, and it is the mom, caring and suffering at this moment for the transgender rights for their kid, and is the teacher in the public school working with kids with no budget to buy the things that they need, is the classically trained musician playing Beethoven as well. It is us on the stages, it is us in this conference, it is anybody in a position of leadership, in a position of just life. We are all advocating for something. There's no one better than the other. It's just, but the ability to move towards those possibilities is important to realize, right? Sometimes your job is teaching, sometimes you can bridge into something else. And I think classical music tells us there's only one way to do things. And if you depart from bassoon, perhaps you were not that good of a bassoonist, or you're, whatever that is, right? It doesn't matter, right? Follow your heart, find your purpose, because finding your purpose means that we are connecting with what makes us happy, which at the end is what makes us free. And that freedom is to share with others.
Thank you. From listening to you, I get very much a journey, and that journey is one that has many different sort of twists and turns. So for my last question, I think before we might open it up for Q&A, so again, we'll have a microphone, you can drop a question into the app, but on the idea of journeying and change and evolution, Marcus, you had referenced being angry, and then now you're in a certain place. I'm wondering if you can share as curators of spaces, of experiences, of dialogue, if your thought process has changed, and if so, how? And then also, how over the next 4 years you think that might change as well too. Do you want to start, Marcus?
Yeah. So I think like early on in my career as like a composer and like a curator, I was like, man, if they could just let me into this space, or if I could just work with so-and-so, or if we can do this, and one of the best shifts for me was like, instead of that, it's more, instead of like, how do I get to work with so-and-so, how do I get to work in this space, or if they allow me to do this, it's like, I'm just going to like do what I'm doing and find my like-minded people, you know what I mean? So it's less about like, how do I get these people to like me, or how do I get these people to, let me into this space, and just like, I'm gonna just keep loving on my people and my community, and people are welcome, and eventually it's like collaborations do we find ways that make sense, or like people want to come over here and like join what we're doing, or how can they work with what we're doing. So I think it's more about like finding people who are like-minded. That requires like being loud about what you're doing. Like, what do you care about? If you're up here and you're talking about all the things that you care about, somebody out there is going to talk to you afterward. You know what I mean? So it's just like loving on your people, on your community, and being loud about it.
I think we can all kind of be self-label ourselves as entrepreneurs in some sense. I mean, definitely what you've done, Marcus, is very entrepreneurial. And I'm reminded of I think it was an actor I saw on some Instagram reel, and he was talking about how he was trying to make it in Hollywood, and he finally realized that he was the cavalry. He wasn't waiting for the cavalry. We are our own cavalry, and I think that's an important thing when you maybe have goals to be in an orchestra. If you're in a conservatory, that's kind of the track that that most people want to take, because it's a stable income. But most of the people that play in orchestra of my generation and my friends, and I was just talking to some recently, a couple hours ago. I mean, they don't like playing in orchestras, and I'm not saying you shouldn't play in an orchestra, but literally, I mean, especially string players. I think it's also reflects the intractableness of what an orchestra is. It's this big institution, right? And one person does not have a lot of control over that, or a lot of voice. But when you do your own thing, you have that voice, and you can put your creative energy in something. It's hard. It's very difficult. I mean, I'm sure we could share stories of, wanting to give up. I've wanted to give up, many times in my career now. But I'm Apollo's 17 years old now, and I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. And I'm sure that goes for everyone else up here as well. I think that we're the people that are gonna make a difference. And also, being small and mid-sized organizations or just one person, we're the ones that are going to inspire the larger institutions to change.
I agree. I like, we joke about it a lot of times with like some of my friends. It's like these like big organizations, like what we have, like individuals or small groups, what we have is like, we're cool. Like a person can be cool, but they don't quite know how to do it, when they get all the people together. So that sometimes they need to like borrow our coolness, and it can be mutually beneficial,
I love that. In terms of journey, I think that, again, we are just so blindsided by our profession. In order to succeed, these are the steps, and this is what you have to do. I remember making the decision to leave the orchestra in which I was principal person for some years, and it was, so oppressive, the environment, so terrible. And eventually I had the courage to just quit and send a letter to the board, denouncing the things that have happened in that orchestra. But at the end, it was a decision of not being in a place that didn't align with my values, right? It was time for something new. And that was very effective, but also the thought in the back of my mind is, how am I leaving the place that has validated me as a musician, right? And leaving that is going to look like, again, I just wasn't able to succeed in that space, right? But I think it's important, again, to find our passion and our joy and our voice in the many places that are out there available to do so. My wife is a filmmaker, and she has a really beautiful documentary out in which she interviews authors, and there's this transgender male, Patrick Khalifa, that before transitioning was a lesbian activist. And in the interview, he says, and in a lifetime, you come out several times. And it's so beautiful to realize that our identity is not a one thing only. And we continue evolving with conversations and evolving with circumstances and coming out to whatever you want to be and need to be and deserve to be. That process is so important to have that opportunity and that realization that is not mandated by anyone else but yourself.
Thank you, thank you. I think we have some time for questions.
Yep. Raise your hands if you. Awesome. So I just wanted to come back to something that you said, Ashleigh, earlier. You talked about this kind of track between finding purpose and that leading to happiness and that leading to freedom, which I think is beautiful and something that I'm thinking a lot about these days. And I think a lot of that starts with developing courage. And I am trying to figure out how to kind of teach this concept of courage to my own students and people that I work with in my community. So I'm curious if you could talk about how you kind of start this journey and how you can share courage with others.
I mean, that's interesting. I think actually a lot for myself around courage and openness and discernment. Those are my 3 values for the calendar year of 2025. I'm also a Buddhist, and that's a huge part of being courageous and how we just live in the world. So spirituality really comes to me. But I think in my own personal journey around being authentic, around not being apologetic, doing a lot of self-reflective work, which was not part of my undergraduate or graduate or postgraduate curriculum, and it really needed to be self-driven. I didn't necessarily have a mentor who was focused on my human development as they were on my musical development. And I would say, as educators, if we can really take the wholeness of the human in front of us and encourage that human development to be able to find what aspects about you can be amplified, what aspects about you are not ones that need to be refined 9 hours every day because they're not quite perfect quite yet, right? As we think about it, how we sort of engage it as a learner, as a practicer. And so for me, it took quite a while to find my own sense of agency and sense of purpose, and have developed an organization and sort of married my own uniquenesses as a result. But that was really quite a struggle. And I think if I had more encouragement to think reflectively and think about the uniquenesses of me being, for instance, a Black female violist, those three things being my trifecta, that I can enter into the world and create a bounty out of that. If someone had told me that, I would have sort of laughed in their face, like, "What are you talking about? Me and my identity being so powerful." But I think about that a lot, and a lot of that has to do with self-reflective work and being strong in oneself. I'll open it up though if other people have thoughts and ideas around courage.
I just want to make a comment about education and the important, I think that at this point, how we are reimagining the information we're providing in our degrees, in our programs, in our classes, in our studios, right? What is important, what have been missing from that education, what is needed to incorporate. So, by the way, I'm a proud member of Cohort 6, Sphinx Lit, right here, present. We were at Juilliard in October, visiting and talking to leaders, and it came to me the realization that whatever Juilliard does, we follow. Obviously, the University of Arkansas is very aware that's a tool that we have in hand. They're doing it. We need to do it as well. So I think it's important also to encourage, and those of you that are in those institutions that are leading the musical paths, that are providing example for us, to take steps into reconsidering curriculum and programs, and to be more inclusive in that aspect of humanness and courage and such.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I think the idea of I think the fact that you're teaching your students courage is amazing, man. Like I haven't saw that done before. You just said it wasn't done for you, you know. I would say a lot of my courage has come from like being really clear with myself about like whose opinion matters, and it ties into this community aspect, right? Because like for me, it was always like, okay, if so and so doesn't like me, I like me. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, my mama liked me, and you know, and I just always wanted to be somebody that like become a man that like my grandma would be proud of, or like the guys I grew up with, that they could look at me and be proud of me, and you know what I mean. And I stood for what I believed in, and you know what I mean. And I think a lot of times what happens is like, all of us who go through conservatories like spaces in these music schools, we get beat up so much, like, you know, mentally, and about this isn't good enough and that isn't good enough and this is lesser because it's not this, and all of these things, and they can kind of like trick you. And like I've met a lot of like I met and I work with a lot of really, really, really dope young Black musicians, and it's like I'm always like pouring into them. It's just like, you know, that like you can do a lot of things that like these people who are lauded can't do, you know, but the trick is that they've made you think that you're lesser, you know. It's like, oh, you like, I've hired sometimes some people from like the conservatories to play in like Black gospel settings, and then like when the spirit goes up, they don't know what to do, you know, or like it's like, you know, there are amazing musicians who maybe don't improvise, and that's not necessarily, that's just not the tradition they come up through, you know. But a lot of times these conservatory things will make these brilliant young Black musicians feel like they have like a deficit, and really it's like you have a superpower, you know. And so I think for me, a lot of courage has come from like just being crystal clear about like whose opinion matters to you, you know. And there's no right or wrong answer, but it's like it's up for you. You should be clear with yourself about who that is. Otherwise, you'll be tricked, and you'll be wrestling with something for a long time that isn't necessarily yours to be wrestling with.
That's beautiful, Marcus. And if I may just pick it up from there and maybe flip the script a little bit, I think, you know, now that I'm in middle age, squarely in middle age, and I can see the older generations and the younger generations, and trying to facilitate a conversation between the two. But I know, you know, as musicians, we all have our mentors, right? We have our parents, and you may have that's a separate relationship. But then our mentors, our teachers, are I think, you know, I revere Kenneth Goldsmith, who taught me at Rice University as a pedagogue and as a person. But I think you need to find the confidence in yourself as well, and kind of let go of that in a certain way. And it's something that I heard recently too that I think is very powerful, and I think can kind of maybe push us all out to do bold and confident things, especially in this tumultuous time that we're going to be living in for some time, unfortunately, is that we Those of us living in the present are the ancestors of our children. And I think if you think of it that way, I mean, I have a 7-year-old, but and these doesn't have to be children in the sense of your flesh and blood. These are the people that you're teaching. These are people that you're touching with your art. We are their ancestors, and they will be the ancestors to come. So I think we can think of it in a different way like that. I think it's maybe helpful. It gives me hope, at least.
Yes, the earth was not gifted to us by our parents, but loaned to us from our children, is a Kenyan Kenyan saying. Do we have any more questions?
Hi, thank you. You guys have been so wonderful. There's a line in a poem by Weldon Keys that says, "Life offers up no miracles, unfortunately, and needs assistance." And so my question was, what is your current practice for creating miracles?
Mine is, I'm like really, really big on this, is that I get people I can trust, and then I trust them. You know what I mean? That's just my honest answer, and it just happens to tie into what the community aspect of what we're talking about today. But like, I don't know. I see a lot of people in leadership positions micromanage, and it's like, then do you want to just do it? You know what I mean? Like, and so my way of coming from where I come from and doing some of the things I've been blessed to be able to do, I consider it a miracle, man. Like, and it was just not something I could have done alone, or just purely on my own merit or something. And so my philosophy is like, get people you can trust, capable, brilliant people, and then just trust them, man. You know what I mean? And then have difficult conversations, have the tools so that you can, when I say I don't necessarily think this idea fits, I'm not saying you're terrible or I don't like you, know what I mean? Like, be able to have hard conversations with them, but like, I think therein lies the key.
Is the creation of new music and art a miracle in of itself? And I think actually fostering the creativity of others, that's where I really find a lot of gratitude, and hopefully the best sense of the word is creating, just allowing someone the space to create something out of nothing. I think that's just amazing.
I think about miracle and I think about immediacy, but I struggle with that idea because I think to me the miracle will be that we're all together, in that next step where we want to be. And I think that people are by nature good intention, and I believe that through the conversations and the many things that we have to do as musicians is more than the music practice in every aspect, but the more that we tap into that goodness, intrinsic goodness, we'll see the miracle of moving together towards our common goal.
If I were to just add, I'm the moderator, but I have a panel reply. But in any case, so with Castle Over Skins, a concert education series around Black culture, Black history, and art in Boston, we have an intercollegiate Black Student Union festival that was started by Dave Norville, who is around here somewhere. And this is the 4th year that we've been able to do it, and bringing in undergraduate, graduate, Black student or Black student alliance, whatever it's sort of called within their particular school, together. It's hard enough to bring in the same school jazz and classical and opera together, so let alone New England Conservatory, Boston Conservatory, Berkeley, Boston University, Longy School of Music, Northeastern, to come together for social outings that highlight Black artistry, to come together for conversations, professional development, co-curate performances together, write music for each other, and give the world premiere. There's some fellows who have gone through that program who are here, and it's beautiful to see them here, building their own spaces. And ultimately, to answer your question, for me, is about building spaces, is how I would say, to be able to create miracles. And it's not that the space is highly Legoed and structured and rigid and finite, but it's literally a blank slate. And it's such a privilege for me as an artistic director and as a co-founder to be able to create a space where organic things can happen, where humans can come together and be human, right? Be social, be communal, which is as we know, a huge part about wellness and about healing, to be in fellowship with one another. So that for me is a miracle to be able to create. I got a card back there that I think maybe we're sort of wrapping up, but I think we have time for maybe one more question, if there's a question.
Speaking of spaces, how can we make classical music spaces feel more inviting to those scared to attend because of the stereotype that these spaces are meant for the wealthy?
Allow alcohol sales. Sorry, I don't mean to be flippant there, but I think that actually does help. You know, alcohol can be a social lubricant, and
Food period.
food period.
and
Okay,
libations.
okay, libation.
Marcus?
I would just say, I mean, just keep going back to your point. Like, just be in conversation with your community. You know what I mean? Like, talk to that community. If your question is like, why are these people not coming or whatever, or if you're concerned about that, ask them. You know, and if they might be like, oh, because it's for the wealthy. Well, then maybe you're charging. Maybe you need to make your tickets more accessible in some way, shape, or form. I don't have all the answers, but like, you know who does have the answer about why they're not coming to your concert? Them people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think too in the dialogue with communities is very important, and asking them what they want to see. We have a beautiful museum in where I live in Northwest Arkansas, Crystal Bridges, and I was talking to the executive director, agreeing that many times the issue is too many doors that you have to cross when you go to a concert, when you go to an artistic event or any event for that matter. Not only the physical doors, but the doors of etiquette and protocol and parking spaces and the many other things. And that's a really, down-to-earth question to ask ourselves. How many doors are we asking people to cross to be able to attend this activity? Can we ameliorate that in any way? Can we reduce the amount of doors? Can we, whatever is needed from our perspective to reach out and to encounter more common space?
Thank you. I think I want to wrap us up here for some closing remarks. And if anyone who had a question didn't get a chance to answer outside, we will be able to stick around for a few minutes and be more than happy to chat. As I mentioned, spirituality is a part of my practice, and I have a quote from a Buddhist philosopher and writer, Daisaku Ikeda, who says that the future exists right now. How we act and live this moment and each passing day determine the future. So I will leave sort of a rapid fire for the sake of time, invitation as a closing takeaway for either how you are thinking about this particular moment as it translates and is intricately connected to the future. What are you thinking about in spaces that you're curating and about your work? And or if you want to challenge our audience members to think about the intentionality of your work right now in this moment and how it is entwined with future outcomes.
Just come back to the reflection that all our experiences as musicians, as artists, as creators, are related to trauma in many ways, and we heard about this in the previous panel earlier today. So the reflection in my mind at the moment is that healing starts within ourselves, and that the only way to go there and bring the change and move together is also what is happening with ourselves. What are we looking for healing? Is it balance? Is it help? Is it therapy? Is it a community? Is it a spirituality? Whatever that is, right? That is needed for self-help, so we can reflect that out.
I would just say love on your people and, foster your communities. And because at the end of the day, that's really all you got. We're seeing a lot of that happen now where it's like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, it's like a lot of these big corporations were supporting DEI and all these things when it was trendy. But like as we're seeing very, very, very quickly, it's like, oh, they weren't part of our community. It's just their interest aligned with ours temporarily. And I just say like, either way, like just love on your people. Sometimes there's gonna be these things that line up and they'll contribute or whatever, and that's amazing. And if it's the right situation, then take that support, but just don't build everything on that. You know what I mean? So my big thing would just love on your people, whoever your people are, your community, because at the end of the day, that's all you got anyway.
And we only have one life. This is the one life we've been afforded. Whether there's an afterlife, that's up to your personal belief. But I feel like this is the moment, and we're living in such a dynamic moment too, that I think it affords, and it's incumbent upon all of us as artists to reflect this for the times. And I loved the conversation last night too about how news, art can capture the context. The context and the nuance of situations that other art forms, other contexts cannot. So we can remember that we can reflect the times in which we're living through our art in a way that future generations will look back and appreciate.
So on that note, keep reflecting and keep building spaces. Thank you so much for joining us.